Alright, so we're gonna do a video instead of a stream because I think it's gonna be a lot more concise. Also because version 2 of the beta is probably gonna end soon. Maybe it's even gonna be ended by the time you watch this video, but we're just gonna do one anyway. So I'm gonna get Fallen Rosemary to SS because she is actually farmable, as some of you might have been asking. I'm sure there are a lot of sources right now on YouTube, so you probably already know, but 4 of her fragments will be available weekly in the Memorial Arena, and if you do have her at SS or higher, another 2 will be available. So you're gonna have to use the new currency to be getting her. I don't think it's gonna be too hard to be getting that, but we'll go into more detail when we get to either version 3 of the Chinese beta or the English test server. So yeah, I think she will be farmable right off the bat. I think that's already confirmed. But, you know, personally I'm expecting some sort of event that would maybe give us a few of her fragments. Maybe 10, maybe 20, I don't know. There's no news about that as far as I know, but I think it makes a lot of sense because she's going to be the first S-rank battlesuit that's going to be farmable right off the bat. So you definitely want to hype it up, right? You want people to really be excited about like, oh, now that I'm with the version that launched the first farmable S-based Valkyrie, I get a head start. I think that is what's usually done in most games, and I think, you know, just as a game, it makes a lot of sense. But I don't know, it's just my 2 cents worth, we'll have to see about that. Also, I think there is going to be a banner that makes more sense to me, but will I pull for it? I don't think so. I just got the House of Thunder to SS, as some of you might know, and that totally wiped out my crystal count. Now, if they did something like maybe, and I'm just saying maybe, lower the guarantee counter for an S rank. Like maybe they have a new banner that does like 80 or 50 pulls even for an S rank card, then will I go for her? I think so. Like 14,000, I know it's a lot, but for an S rank card, I think it's worth it. Or maybe they could even do something like the dorm supplies where they have the first card have a lower guarantee and then it goes back to 100. So will that happen? Nobody knows, but I'm just saying from my personal opinion, if I were to be convinced to actually want to pull for her, that might be one of the conditions that I would look at. Like, yeah, I know it's an S rank and everything, and I know they want to promote it as like the first S rank that's farmable right off the bat, but if you're gonna expect people to pull, and I might be totally wrong here, like people might want to pull for her anyway, but personally for me, I feel like after especially going for the House of Thunder to SS and like wiping out my entire crystal count, buying crystals isn't too much of a problem, but then I've always been saying that, you know, I do control my spending, and having 2 S ranks back to back is really unusual. So no, I don't think it's going to be like the usual me pulling for S ranks kind of a deal. Also, the same thing with the Stigmata. Like, Irene Adler, wow, that's really, really good. But we're gonna have like 2 sets of Stigmata. I'm really wondering how they're gonna do it because the even-numbered updates are supposed to be the low gacha intensity, and it's just so intense. There's an S rank, there's an augment. Okay, fine. I'll give them the pass on the augment because augments are usually, especially an A-base augment, no cost. But we then have an extra weapon, you know, 2 extra weapons in this case, and 2 extra sets of Stigmata. So there's going to be a lot that's going to be dropping in version 4.2. I'm really excited to see how they're going to roll it out, just because of the fact that it's just so much to unpack. I mean, fair enough, we've had like really new banners, like Talwar was one of the newer versions of a weapon banner when we had the first ever augment, which was Striker Fulminata. So now that it's another first of its kind, we're probably going to see a new banner, though I'm just really unsure at this point. So yeah, that's my 2 cents worth again, this time on the spending part of Fallen Rosemary. And as you can see on the screen right now, I haven't been talking too much of what's been happening on the screen. I have a team that's unconventional for me because it has 2 DPSs, but another thing I wanted to point out is that this is done on the day before I got Fallen Rosemary to SS, so it was done with ice weather and it lowered fire damage by 50%, so I could not show the PRI arms. and I just decided to like randomly bring in a team and kind of show Fallen Rosemary as a support in general, like as an elemental support, not just a lightning support, just like how Azure Imperia can also support other elements. And yeah, I think it was a pretty good display. Also, like, if you really want to make 2 DPSs work, I guess the new format of the Abyss kinda plays into that, but in general, I just would not recommend having 2 DPSs, unless, like, you have enough damage to take out entire waves without the need of supports. But that doesn't usually happen. But in games where these kinds of builds work, that's how it might usually go. Like, you'll store up enough SP on one of your characters for an extremely powerful ultimate, and then you just have like the wave that's weak against that ultimate, and then you have that DPS come out to use that ultimate and like kind of wipe out the wave entirely. So then, you know, you can have the other DPS to kind of like, maybe one of them has a really strong ultimate and is really burst, like on Utu kind of burst, and the other is like kind of sustained damage DPS, like what you're seeing on screen, which is Shadow Knight. So that's how you can play double DPSs, but for Honkai, I don't think it's really geared that way, especially like if you're talking about the example that I brought out, which is on Utu. Without the appropriate support, you're not going to see the kind of damage numbers that you would usually see on an extremely burst damage skill. Anyway, back to what's happening on the screen right now. So we have a double S Shadow Knight with a level 50, unfortunately level 50 Nuada's Revenge, because I ran out of materials. So I think it's also quite fitting that we use a Valkyrie like that, because she isn't the best Abyss killer nowadays. When she first came out, she was like the top of the line, but you know, there's a lot of releases recently, and so testing a Valkyrie that's like kind of in that range with the new support might actually be a better choice than just bringing Dihasha Thunder out. And you know, most of the credit might go to Dihasha Thunder, it might go to Fallen Rosemary. It's not going to be as easy to gauge. But then again, we are also in a new environment. This is Red Lotus with 313 EH, so even personally, I don't really know how to gauge whether or not I'm doing a lot of damage. Like, I don't really know which wave is supposed to be super tanky and which wave is supposed to be just normal in that sense. So those two at the start seem really tanky, but I think it's intentional. Like, those are supposed to be tanky as opposed to Shadow Knight not being a good damage dealer. On a side note, Fallen Rosemary seems to be dealing a lot of damage, so if not with Irene Adler, she might even deal more. I'm probably gonna do that in version 3 of the beta. Wow, look at that damage from Shadow Knight. Okay, so as a support, I guess we really can boost a lightning damage deal. Oh, come on. Okay, anyway, so like boosting the lightning damage dealer's damage, see, now the support skills are wearing off, and we can see like the really sharp drop in lightning damage. So, I mean, I'm not going to go into details. It's not going to be like my usual DPS testing and all those heavy, you know, information heavy kind of a video. It's just going to be a lot of gameplay, especially since all the stats are unlikely to be finalized. And, you know, it's just going to be a lot about animation and like how they play in general, like just to see if I can give you guys a feel of how the Valkyrie feels. Couldn't find a better word. So we'll talk about the new Abyss in a later video. For now, we're going to cut over to the Surtur and on Utu PRI gameplay, and that'll be pretty much my brief look into what remains of the Chinese beta version 2. Of course, there's still the new crafting system. I'm going to cover that in version 3 because they did a partial update. So there's a lot of things that they have not added in, so I'm not going to touch on that in this video. Also, by the time that update dropped, this video was pretty much completed, so you know, it's not gonna be very convenient to kind of just squeeze it in. And anyway, we're here now with the Vermilion Knight, who's going to be using the Surtur PRI just to have a feel of like how it's going to work out for her. And the Surtur PRI is a really interesting weapon because it's the first time they have 2 different passives for 2 different battle suits. In my honest opinion though, I think it's a waste of 1 slot. But let's look at the active before looking at the individual passives. So the active, like all PRI arms, does not consume any SP, and it has a 30-second cooldown. but it does consume 50% of your current HP. So don't worry, it's not max HP, it's not like you can only use it once and if you don't have healing, you won't be able to use it again. You can actually use it probably for a maximum of 3 times if you don't have the ability to heal, because when your max HP falls below 20%, you won't be able to use the active again. It ignites enemies probably in the entire map because of the size of the animation, and generates a shield for the wielder equal to 80% of the wielder's max HP. So despite losing half your HP, you do actually get more in terms of like HP value. Damn, missed that. Anyway, so like in terms of HP value, it's up there. It lasts for only 12 seconds as long as the buff lasts, but you don't have to be worried about like something killing you just because you use your weapon active skill, even if your HP is low. And here's where it becomes really useful for Blood Rose, because it prevents her ultimate from draining her HP for 12 seconds, which is as long as that buff lasts. Then you also have the increased base attack because it's a PRI arm, and you also have the constant ignition of enemies. So I did a damage test. I'm not gonna show it on screen, but she basically did twice the amount of damage she would deal without the Surtur PRI, which is, and you know, the non-PRI test I did was just with the normal Surtur. And then we go into the other passive, which is actually only for Vermilion Knights. So when you use your ultimate skill, you actually restore 8 SP. It was previously 15 SP, but they dropped it to 8. So you do only spend 22 instead of 30 SP when you're doing your ultimate. And then we get to the final passive, and this one is kind of ambiguous, so we are not too sure if it applies to both. Personally, I think it applies to both, but if it does only apply to the Vermilion Knight, then it is kind of a waste of a passive because it increases the ultimate and charge attack damage by 30%. That number, I don't know if it's finalized, but currently it is set at 30%, and it is a pretty good number. So if it applies to both battle suits, then okay, it's a really good weapon in general. So now we've taken out Azure Imperia and added Fallen Rosemary instead because of Blood Rose's leader skill. So we're gonna switch her in to do some debuffs, get some debuffs going before we actually have Blood Rose come back out and dish out some damage. So we're just here to give you guys a feel of like how these weapons look, generally just how they look in combat, and hopefully also show a bit of their performance. Now, I mean, like, if that passive really works for both battle suits, which honestly I think it does, then Surtur PRI is just great in general. But personally, I would not be using the Vermilion Knight for prolonged fights. If I do, probably gonna limit the activation to just once in, like, a critical part of the fight. But yeah, as you can see, the damage dealt by Blood Rose is pretty insane, and she can pretty much use this weapon to take on bosses as well. I can see her taking down some bosses pretty quickly because you do kind of have access right off the bat. I guess if you ran like Phoenix or Azure Imperia with Lightning Empress as the leader, you do have a decent team, and if it's Phoenix, it's gonna be a decent F2P team, provided you do have Surtur, which unfortunately is not gonna be available in the bounty mark as far as I know. So unfortunately, if you do not have Surtur, it's not going to be too big an update for you, but if you do have Surtur, I think there's a chance it might be in the BP shop. I'll check it out in version 3, but anyway, so if you do have Surtur, it really boosts the Blood Rose damage a lot. Also, at S, Blood Rose does have that passive ability that increases her damage when her HP drops below 50%. And for the amount of time she's been farmable, I believe a lot of people have her at S, if not S rank, so that's gonna really help a lot of people out a lot. Unfortunately for myself, mine is still at S rank and is nowhere near even S because I got her really late. But, you know, it is what it is. Anyway, so I hope you guys have gotten a feel of how these PRIs are in battle. Unfortunately, I couldn't show like the full extent of Fallen Rosemary's lightning support capabilities because I don't have a well-equipped lightning team and I don't have access to the Hash of Thunder at the moment, so we're gonna have to wait a little longer to see that. But before we go, I'm gonna show you guys 2 really rough runs against Argent Knight the boss, Argent Knight Artemis, and one's gonna be with the Surtur PRI and the other is going to be just with the old Surtur. And we're not gonna do the optimal run, but we're gonna do a run that is going to really showcase like what the big difference is in terms of like having access to that second slash, for example. And we'll cut to it right now. So the run is not optimized, and to add to that, we do not have affixes done. But we also do have a SS1 Vermilion Knight, so that is, you know, some additional stats. But anyway, so what I wanted to highlight is right here. So the first hit of On Utu actually drives that trauma gauge to maximum, and so the second hit gets all the damage. And I think that's a really important mechanic, not just for this specific fight, but this specific fight, you know, had the trauma gauge at the right place for me to show that off. But here's the thing, there is already an optimal run with the non-PRI on Utu that does 31,626 points. So I guess there are people questioning like how much it's going to help or whether or not it's even needed. Honestly, I think like the casuals and the casual whales, if you will stand to gain more from this PRI, but players on all levels will still stand to gain from additional base attack. And that's all we have for this video. Thank you guys for watching. This has been MG. I'll see you guys soon. Bye bye.